why didn't I ever follow this dream that I wanted and instead I'm playing in other people's sandboxes? Let me try and actually make my own characters and see what happens with it.
Greetings and welcome to the Creative Writing Wizard podcast, where we chat with published authors and writers to learn more about their books, their writing process, and a bit more about them. Today I'm joined by author Ria Parisi. Welcome, Ria, to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Indeed, indeed. It's a pleasure. So for those listening in, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So, as you said, my name is Ria Parisi. I'm a YA fantasy author with my debut coming out in 2 weeks now. It's very exciting. The book is called, I brought a copy right here. It's called Wolves and Stags, and it is a high fantasy romantasy YA book with a plus size main character and no negative commentary on weight. And I recommend it for fans of X-Men who want to see something like that power set, but in high fantasy.
That's awesome. Yeah, I really liked your approach there, and as you mentioned, the no negative aspect to the plus size characters. Can you talk a little bit about what led you to do that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm somebody who's been plus size basically her entire life. And you never really, when I was growing up, you never really saw characters who were plus size B main characters. They were always like the fat, funny sidekick or the villain. And we started to see more plus size characters get representation as I got older, but a lot of times those stories would be focused on their journey either with weight loss or accepting who they were as a person having to do with their weight. So I thought that it was important to write stories where fat people just existed. They didn't have to confront anything about their bodies. They were just existing in their world, and the stories didn't have to be about what number was on the scale. It could just be about who they were as people.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I definitely can resonate with that. And it's very apparent in the book, having read the advanced reader copy, that you do recognize that the character is plus size,
Hmm.
but it doesn't really change like the story. It doesn't change her actions in the story. It she's a person and she's
Right.
existing in that world. And I really liked your approach that it's part of her character, it's part of her identity. But that doesn't mean like the stereotypes that we tend to see in media today. And I really liked your approach on that front.
Oh, thank you.
I guess another question for you is, you've been looking to write, and maybe even specifically this story,
Hmm.
um, all the way back since you were 14. Is that sound about right?
That sounds about right. Not this story in particular, but the first time I sat down and was like, I want to be an author and write stories, I was 14 years old. The book I wrote or started to write then will never see the light of day. It was terrible. It was like a portal fantasy with unicorns that made absolutely no sense whatsoever. Um, but I really wanted to write, and I was like that 11-year-old who had like a handwritten journal where I was writing Digimon fan fiction. Like so I like always loved to write and I wanted to create worlds, and when I was 14, I started that. It didn't really continue through, and then I discovered online role playing, like writing different characters from fandoms with people, and I fell in love with that. And I did that all the way up until I was 30. Like for 15 years, I was writing fan fiction and role playing with people. That's actually how I met my spouse. We role played on a Harry Potter website together. That's how we met at 15. And then finally, at the pandemic, I went, why didn't I ever follow this dream that I wanted? And instead, I'm playing in other people's sandboxes. Let me try and actually make my own characters and see what happens with it. And I wrote this novel and I queried it, and now here we are.
Indeed, indeed. And
Yeah.
like as this is your debut novel,
Hmm.
which is pretty amazing. Like so, when I read it, I was like, wow, like Ria really knows what she's talking about, and yeah, I feel like you really knocked it out of the park for your first debut kind of novel. Like, well
Oh,
done.
thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and it's interesting how many people I talk to where they say how they started with some sort of fan fiction writing for fun, and then how that shifts. One of the ones that you mentioned was around, and I want to make sure I get this terminology correctly because it's new one to me. The Raylo
Yep.
fanfic is
I see you have Kylo Ren behind you. Yeah.
he's just like right over
The
there. Yeah.
little guy. Yep. And this book in particular did not start as a Reylo fan fiction, but it started as like an idea for one that maybe I would do at some point. And then just completely evolved from there. So I would say like it has Reylo like feelings, like some vibes to it, which is for anyone who doesn't know, it's the romantic relationship between Rey and Kylo Ren in the Star Wars sequels. And so I would say like you can get some of that feel with like a masked villain and an enemies to lovers kind of plot going on in the background, but I don't want to like mislead people and be like this is exactly like Raylo because it's not. It really changed as I was writing it, but I was oh gosh, I was very active in the like Raylo RP and like fanfic and cosplay scene for a very long time. And I mean, that's where Ali Hazelwood started, and Thea Gonzon, and Alexandra Kennington's book just came out yesterday, actually, Blood Beneath the Snow, and that also was Raylo inspired. We have like a Raylo author Discord where we all just sort of hang out together. And I think a lot of it comes from like everyone was kind of mad. We wanted them to actually end up together instead of Ben dying, and so we're like, we can fix this with our own writing.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's like it definitely was a thought of mine watching the movies is like they built up this relationship and then it's like, oh, okay, sweet, I'm down. And then
Right.
you're dead. It's like,
He's
what?
gone. They kissed, he smiled, he was dead. And I was
Yeah.
like, no.
Yeah, well, thank you for taking this on as a a spin-off imagination kind of that. Um, so you mentioned that you wanted to write something that was of your own. Um, Starting with a Raylo fanfic, which is science fiction based. What led for the shift to fantasy based, or was it always a fantasy type story?
It was always fantasy. The idea that I had was to write like an AU Raylo, like almost Shadow and Bone fantasy-esque fan fiction. And then from there, I was kind of like jotting down, okay, so if that's the fan fiction I'm going to do, like what character plays what role from Star Wars, basically. And then when I then branched off to do my own work, I took some of that inspiration, but then like you can't. At first, my first draft, you could definitely match up like this character was meant to be Poe, and then like that just doesn't exist anymore. It's changed so much. But yeah, I wanted to write something more high fantasy because that's always been like my bread and butter. When I was growing up, I was a huge fan of like Tolkien. But I also like Dune, so I like to be fair, like sci-fi has always been a thing for me too. But I feel more comfort writing fantasy than science fiction because I'm somebody, if you start giving me like spaceship schematics, I like glaze over. I don't think I could come up with them myself. Whereas a magic system, I'm like, okay, I can like kind of figure this out. And sometimes not personally, but like I also like just like vibes magic systems too, like softer magic systems. So like I'm like, okay, this is less daunting than like how do all of these mechanics work for me.
That's totally fair, and it's something that I've seen, in a few other people who have done early reviews, and even within, the reading myself. Is I found that you had a fairly unique magic system. I don't want to go into too many spoilers because this is, in and around the time of your release. But yeah, what kind of led you to going down that route? Because I know, in fantasy, there's a lot of different ways of approaching magic. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a humongous comic books fan. And so I wanted my magic system to feel more like superheroes than like we're like wizards who can do like a large array of things. Whereas in like things like X-Men or Inhumans or even My Hero Academia, people kind of have one power that is specifically their own. And that's kind of the route that I wanted to go. And from there, it was sort of like matching up the powers to like the best character suited for them. Um, and I definitely like there's some experimentation in the book, and I have put in marketing that like there's magical weapons that are created in a very brutal way. So, um, and that definitely came from inspiration from like comic books like X-Men, where like you see like the experiment on Wolverine to give him his superpowers, and that's kind of the I guess my sci-fi love kicking in that I added that kind of experimentation to give people magic versus like it's just something that innately happens for them.
Nice. Yeah, I dig that. And it's yeah, you touched on the piece that
Yeah,
I won't say anymore
yeah.
because I yeah, but yeah, I definitely thought that you approached it from a fairly balanced approach. So you know you use the word like brutal, but I thought that you handled the violence and the action side of it in such a way that it's like it's not too much. It's not like over the top, but it's enough
Hmm.
that it gives like weight to, oh my gosh, wow, that's intense. If that's the situation you're in, and oh wow, that's what you came out of. Yeah, it really added to like the emotional impact of the main character as she's trying to make decisions or figure out certain things. So that's definitely a hard balance in my opinion. How do you feel about that? Like, so, you mentioned that this is a YA book, but we've, got quite the range in terms of what, goes into YA books.
Hmm.
Um, what kind of led you to going this way versus another way of like saying, no violence at all and kind of like behind the door violence, or like the other end of the spectrum where, it's a little bit more, let's say, descriptive.
Yeah. So I wanted there to still be action and violence on the page, but I wanted to make sure that like I guess in my head I was thinking of it almost as like a rating system. Like if my book is YA, it should be like a PG-13 movie. And like we can deal with heavy topics in PG-13 movies, we're just not necessarily seeing some of the bigger things on screen. Like I think of like a good TV show that I think is an example is like The 100, and that actually started as a YA book series. They
Hmm.
deal with some really heavy stuff in The 100, but
Yeah.
you don't always necessarily see it like right up in your face.
Hmm.
So I let myself like go into some of the darker topics, and I'm kind of a horror junkie too. So like I like, I like exploring really dark themes, but with metaphor. Like the movie Alien is one of my favorite movies of all time, and that
Hmm.
like really dives into metaphor. And so I like taking those darker themes, letting characters kind of deal with those darker themes, but then the most brutal things you never actually see on page. They're talked about, but we don't see them happen. So that way, if a 15-year-old is reading the book, which I hope they do because that's who it was written for, like 15 and up, um, they're able to like think about these things and maybe some of the themes that I'm implying with them, but they don't have to like be confronted with, oh, this makes me super uncomfortable. And then if an adult is reading it, they can like really be like, oh, that is kind of bad, and like see some of the like, it's a little bit easier for them to unpack. Yeah.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, and as much as there is the brutal aspect in some of the concepts. One of my favorite scenes is fairly early on,
Hmm.
where the main character takes one of the other characters and goes and dances in the rain, and like there's something about that was so whimsical, and it
Hmm.
like it kind of shocked me in a good way of like, huh, this is such a neat thing for the character to do that I feel like I haven't seen that many books or stories like
Oh.
where the character just feels like this is a physical expression of the emotion that I'm experiencing. Let's go dance in the rain.
Yeah.
um yeah, I really like that, like that there is that whimsical fantastical side to it too.
I think in YA we get a lot of strong female characters who I love, but we're seeing them as strong because they are just super strong warriors or feminine rage, and that is how we're portraying their strength. Whereas I don't think that always is necessary to be a strong female character, that you can be soft and feminine and like Dancing in the Rain and still be able to like kick ass when the time calls for it. And I wanted to write a character that's like it's okay to be soft and to like these things and to like dressing up and dancing and being kind to people, but that doesn't mean that you're like a pushover and a doormat. And so, yeah, I like the Dancing in the Rain scene too. I put that in like a lot of my little trope maps. I'm like, there's the Dancing in the Rain scene.
Yeah, definitely worth that. Yeah, I guess as you talk about like the trope side of things,
Hmm.
this is a bit of a newer experience for me. I tend to read more like I guess adventure fantasy where they don't tend to say the tropes necessarily, but
Hmm.
in like more of the romantic side, romantasy, they talk a little bit more about the tropes. How did you go about saying what the tropes were? Like, is it only based on what's in the content, or is it like you wanted to highlight certain things that go along with the story?
Yeah, I'll say like with the writing process, I didn't sit down and go, okay, I want this trope, and this trope to be in the book. The only thing I knew I wanted was enemies to lovers because I'm just an enemies to lovers girly. Like that's like I love that so much. And so I knew we were doing that. And then I just wrote, and I wasn't really one who was going to be like, okay, and now I'm going to list out all the tropes, but I saw that's what people were doing in their marketing. And I was like, okay, so I guess I need to figure out what they are if I'm going to do the same thing. Because when I was querying, it became apparent to me that like if you were going to go the traditional route, you had to market yourself in a certain way on on social media. And I had a following on social media from cosplay before turning to being an author, so I had some people to like try and market myself to. So from there, I like looked through and I literally I like Googled popular romance tropes. And like I looked through and I'm like, which ones do I think actually fit my story and I think I can like talk about it. And I like the ones I picked out, I have enemies, lovers, obviously, masked villain, found family, like those sort of things. But like I
Hmm.
don't really lean into that, not in this book at least, like the one bed trope or like the fake dating. And I love those books, but I'm like, no, I don't have any of those in here.
That's totally fair. Yeah, and I guess touching on the cosplay a little bit,
Mhm.
what would you say is your favorite cosplay? So you mentioned that you've done Harry Potter, and I think you on your
Mhm.
socials you mentioned you've done Star Wars 2 is another big one. Yeah, what would you say is one of your more favorites to cosplay to?
Probably my favorite right now, because it's the most recent one that I made, is Shallan from the Stormlight Archives. I spent 14 hours hand embroidering pattern on
Wow.
her Hava. I'm literally in my cosplay room now. I think I have like yeah, I have like Cassian wings behind me.
Holy, that's awesome.
that's that's for my partner. But that's probably my new favorite one. Like some of my older stuff, I really like cosplaying Yennefer from the Witcher series. My daughter's name is Cirilla, if that tells you anything. so, um, but yeah, I got into cosplay like oh goodness, I was 19, so it's been a long time, and my partner and I do it together, and we used to do a lot of charity work with it. Like we would dress as superheroes and Star Wars characters and go to like hospital visits and different charity organizations to like raise money for different causes. Like I have Crohn's disease, so we would do the Crohn's Walk often to raise money. And I really liked giving back to the community in that way and like getting to like live characters to do that. Yeah.
Hmm. That's super cool of you. Yeah, like and you certainly built up a substantial following on social media. How have you found that experience on that side of things? So, you started. It sounds like you started as a cosplayer, and now
Mhm.
you've like doing a little bit of both and leaning into the author side. How have you found that experience?
There's pluses and minuses to being on social media so often. Most of my TikTok following is from cosplay. Since switching over to being an author, I haven't grown that much on TikTok, which is fine. Like it gets enough views that it's like it's still worth the time, but it's not growing as much as it did with my cosplay. Most of my Instagram following is from being an author. And so if I were to like give any authors advice, I would say at this point, Instagram is for some reason the algorithm is working better with the content. And I often will just post the same thing on both and then just see which one does better. So that way I'm not making like multiple bits of content every single day. I would drive myself crazy. Um, but, being an author has been, in my opinion, easier than being a cosplayer on social media, at least for me, because being a cosplayer means that, like, the way I look is often perceived and commented on by people. And, like, I had an experience a few years ago where somebody took one of my Ray photos and posted it in, like, a Star Wars shit posting, uh, like, Facebook, and it was brought to my attention, and there were literally, and I'm not even kidding, over 1,000 comments about how I was fat. And I felt like that broke me of like ever caring about what anyone said about my body because it was like, it's all there. The worst has happened. So at that point, what does it matter? Cosplay whoever you want, just enjoy your life. And, you know, anytime I get negative comments, it's with the cosplay stuff. Or when I give an opinion about Star Wars or Alien, the boys come out of the woodwork. It's like the young boys. There's like 15-year-olds who don't actually understand metaphors. But like, um, but it's been better being an author. I haven't experienced as much negativity. Occasionally there'll be some things that I just block and move on. I don't like playing in like drama online. It's just like I'm here to market, I'm here to be professional, and we will like move on. But I enjoy making the content. Like I enjoy the creative aspect of that. But I'm also chronically online and need to like take a step back every so often.
Yeah, I think we all do on that front. Yeah, and I think I think that's part of why I really was drawn to your story, and I think stories like yours, in both in your personal and in your written work, are so important. Is that being able to show characters who are plus size,
Hmm.
but also there's a lot of diversity within your story too, which is super important. So that you're taking your personal experience, which the internet can be nasty sometimes, also
Yeah.
can be super positive, kind of depends on the day. But you're taking that experience, and now you have a story where you're advocating for more stories like these,
Hmm.
which I'm super down for. I think that our like the book industry, media in general, could benefit from more stories like yours.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. I think especially too in the YA space. I think we're seeing more and more. I'm seeing a lot of plus size characters in like the adult romance space, which I think is awesome. But I'd love to see more like plus size heroines and heroes, like heroes especially. Male plus size characters need so much more love. So often you'll see like a plus size. I did it in my book, so I can't even like complain. But like yeah, a plus size female with a like straight size male. Like we need some more like plus size men too. I think that would be awesome. But especially for teenagers to read, I think, because they're the ones who need like people to look up to and like know that they're not othered and they don't have to be like a sidekick. They can be their own main character.
Totally. Yeah, totally. And it's funny that you mentioned because when I first saw your book, I realized that a lot of what you're mentioning in your story kind of reminds me of something that I'm working on, which is totally, yeah, totally out of the blue. I didn't even share on socials about it because like algorithms can link people together that are similar.
Hmm.
But yeah, it was like super cool to see some of the points come up within my own novella that I'm working on. I guess the question to you though is, you talked about how you had the trope that you wanted, the enemies to lovers.
Hmm.
You had the Raylo to fantasy. How did you go about taking those concepts and like moving it into being an actual book and like fleshing out the
Mm.
details and getting into the actual writing?
Yeah, so I have ADHD, so if I don't outline, it's never happening. It's like, it's like I must have a playlist and I must have an outline for each chapter, or we're just sitting and staring at a screen. Nothing moves. So the first thing I did was I took those ideas and I made like a little character sheet of like each big character I knew I wanted to be in the story. And I made a very basic like three-act structure. Like, okay, in this act I want it to be here, this act here, this act here. And then from there, I stepped away from it and I listened to a lot of music in the playlist that I made. And I'm somebody that like it's not the lyrics to songs, but it's like the way a composition moves in a song. There's a song I cannot remember the band, but it's called Beneath the Brine, and I listened to that song maybe 20 times because I just felt like that's how the final battle was going to go. Like the way that the music swelled in it and how it went down and then came back up. Like this is how I wanted it to be. And I like envisioned the scene to the music. And then I wrote my outline and then I went in and like finally like pieced it all together. And I'm also someone I write like I write chapter to chapter. I don't just go in and like write the scenes I want to write as much as I'd love to do that. But I'm also someone I let myself skip. There was a chapter in this book that I just skipped over in the first draft. I just wrote insert cool chapter here and then kept going. And then it was actually easier when I went back because I was like, okay, so this is exactly what needs to be here because now I have to bridge these two chapters together. But yeah, no, I'm very much like a plotter. If I haven't plotted myself in like thoroughly, it's just not. I am not doing anything at a computer.
That's fair. Yeah. Well, you're talking to a fellow plotter, so
Yay!
yeah, we have that in common as well. Yeah, I'd say it's interesting to hear how everybody that I've talked to thus far has had like completely different ways of going about it, which I think is super cool and super encouraging. Because I know a lot of authors or writers who are aspiring to be authors, they set out to write something and they see,
Mhm.
oh, I plot. I should do that. Okay, so then they try to copy someone else's process, and then then they find out that they're actually a pantser or running by
Right.
the seat of your pants. Um, and so I hope that these are encouraging to people to find that everyone seems to have their own way of doing it. And as a great example being, you found a way to do it and you were able to write it, and now it's publishing. At the time of this recording, it's coming out pretty soon. At the
Yeah.
time of the release of the video, it'll probably be coming out.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, can you talk a little bit about so you've taken the story, you've
Mhm.
written the book. How did you go from that point to where you kind of are today, where have a publishing deal, and then you have the book coming out?
Sure. So I'm very lucky that, as I said, I met my partner writing. I have an in-house alpha reader, which is like the nicest thing possible. They read every single chapter I write and then like bunches and bunches of notes. So it's like they help me with my editing process. Cannot thank them enough. And then we went out to beta readers, get opinions, everything. I went back, I edited, oh gosh, I think there was like 5 rounds of editing on this thing before we queried. And then I wanted to go like the full traditional route. I love self-publishing. I do not have time to run my own business. It was like if I didn't have a team, nothing was going to happen because I have a full-time day job. I have a disabled kid. It just was not something that I could do for myself. So I was like, if this is going to happen, we're going to have to go the traditional route. So I queried maybe, gosh, I think it was like 110 agents. I got 10 full requests. All of them were rejections, including my agent I have now. So, she's a fun story. She rejected me, but she had asked for my work in progress during the full manuscript. And she said she was really interested in that and to come back to her when I was done with that book. And then I had also submitted to some small presses that I thought were really interesting. And Inked Gray ended up giving me the book deal. So I went back to some of the people who still had my full manuscript, and I let them know I had this deal if they maybe wanted to come on. And I ended up reaching out to that agent who had rejected me because we had had some open communication. And I just thanked her for like everything that she had done with, the advice she had given me. And she said, "Can you hop on a phone call tomorrow?" And I was like, "What?" And so she said, "I really loved your first book, but I didn't know how to sell it. It is now with a publisher. I'm happy to handle that contract, and I will help you with your next book that I really wanted to work with." And so I ended up signing with my agent, and I had the book deal at the same time. And then publishing moved
Wow.
so slow, so I couldn't talk about it for like 8 months. It
Oh my
was it
gosh.
was crazy. Like I was like sitting there like, so when can I tell people that this is happening? And it ended up being that it was my birthday and I was in Disney World and my finished contract showed up on my email.
Oh my goodness.
And I was like, "Oh my God." And so I signed them. I signed them. I went and got an "I'm celebrating" pin and cried watching the fireworks. And then it was so fun. And then from there, the editing process started with my publisher. And we did dev edits and line edits and all of that fun stuff. And my dev editor, I love her so much. She is the one who was like, "We need to put more romance in this book." But a lot of the romance scenes were added at that point. Like, so that was fun for me because I love romance. So I was like, "Oh yay, we can add more stuff into this and have it be a little fun in that aspect." And yeah, now we're here. We went through that whole process with them, and it's interesting being with a small press because I feel like I'm almost getting the best of both worlds because my royalties are very different than somebody who is with like a large publisher, and I'm more hands-on. I got to pick my cover artist, who's actually one of my best friends, and she did a beautiful job. And you know, there's things that like go on in the behind the scenes that like I've heard like self-publishing people have to deal with, and I'm like, my friends at Big Five don't have to worry that Amazon like took my book down. What is going on? It's back. It's all working, but it's like, so it's interesting. It's an interesting like a little middle place to be where
Hmm.
you have a lot more control and a team that I can talk to like very personally. But I also didn't have to like hire an editor and hire a cover artist and do all of that on my own. So I like that I'm with a small press. It's nice. Yeah.
That's awesome. I guess out of curiosity, so you mentioned, over 100 rejections.
Yeah.
Um, at in During that process, did you ever think, maybe I should try to self-publish it, or like what was the thought process behind that? I know you mentioned,
Hmm.
that you have a full-time job, you don't have the either time or resources potentially to do that, but I know that's certainly a subject that's come up a lot with other authors is who are trying to go traditionally published, then have that question around, should I maybe try to self-publish? I haven't been able to find, the right place for it yet.
Right. I didn't lean that route quite yet with Wolves. I did think about shelving it and just putting it aside for a little bit and then focusing on my work in progress because that did have some interest. And I also understand because like I love my debut so much, but it's much harder to market a YA high fantasy in a market that's saturated with YA high fantasy when the other book I was working on is a sapphic retelling of Orpheus and Eurydice. That is a lot easier for an agent to like say, "I have this book that's a little different." Like, so I kind of instead felt I was going to just put all my eggs in that basket.
Hmm.
And I was putting Wolves aside. I honestly thought that like it was time for just Wolves to go on the shelf for a little bit when my book deal like came in, and I was like, "Oh, it is gonna happen. Oh my gosh." And I felt it was the best case scenario because at the time when I was querying, it's not so much that anymore thanks to Rebecca Yaros, but when I was querying, no agent wanted high fantasy. they were all saying like we want grounded contemporary fantasy, and I was like, oh shoot, that is not what I wrote. So I did not write to trends. But now that we're seeing like such a rise in romantasy, more agents are looking for high fantasy work. But so I was just like, okay, maybe I should just put this aside for now. It doesn't mean it's bad. It's just not what the market is looking for at the moment. I'll work on this one that's a little different. And then the deal came in, and I was like, well, okay, best case scenario. Small press is taking this book. It's gonna happen. Then I can, like, really work on the other one. And maybe end up with a larger press or stay with a small press, like, whatever happens with it, because I'm happy here. And yeah, so I never felt like I had to say, okay, let's fully change what we were aiming for. I think if the second book hadn't worked out, I might have been like, okay, now we need to rethink and think if maybe self-publishing is the way to go for us, because no matter what, I knew I wanted to be published. And I don't like need someone to tell me that like, okay, your book is good, we can publish it, to know that
Hmm.
I wanted to put it out there in the world.
Yeah, definitely. And you've certainly, based on the things I've seen, you're certainly creating a good deal of buzz, which is awesome to see because, as I mentioned, I really enjoyed the book,
Oh, thank you.
and I'm not just saying that because
No,
I
yeah.
don't think I would say it if I didn't actually enjoy it. But yeah, I think it's really cool to see that yeah, that your book is getting a lot of traction. And you've mentioned that you're working on another book, which I
Mhm.
believe is a different
It
universe.
is
It's
the
not.
oh gosh, yeah, no, the second book that I was working on, it's a like a Regency era like Sapphic, Orpheus, and Eurydice. It's very very different. Um, but Wolves was originally pitched as a trilogy. I'm hoping I can talk to you guys more if some stuff pulls through here that there might be some sequels along the way. So we'll cross our fingers on that.
Fair enough. Yeah, I was going to ask you that question, but thank
Yeah.
you for
Yeah,
giving me.
no, because like I was like, I know technically this could be a standalone, but let's hope and pray that some stuff comes through because like there's more story to tell here.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Yeah, I will say the one thing that I found that was kind of funny going into the book, because as I've mentioned to previous authors, I try to go a little bit more blind into stories,
Mhm.
was to find out that one of the characters has the same name as me. Although I will say that they spell it
They spell
different,
it
so
differently.
it's a different person. It's not me. So don't be coming at me in the comments about, oh my gosh, what the heck are you doing? Yeah, it was definitely a different experience for me because like see
Yeah,
my own name kind of in a book essentially.
yeah. He's one of my favorite characters. I love Glenn. Like I love writing Glenn, but what's interesting about that is that I know like some authors are different on whether or not they read reviews or not. I wasn't sure if I wanted to. My very first review came in. It was a nice review. Like no shade to any reviewers here. It was a very nice review. I felt so anxious and like sick. I didn't even want to look at it. And then I finally decided to read it. It broke me from ever caring what anyone says in the best way possible. Like I love this reviewer. She literally wrote two paragraphs about how she hates the name Glenn so much she had to take a star away from the book. That was the funniest thing I've ever like. I was like seriously, like I love this woman. I'm like, you are so true to yourself. Thank you for this review. You made me laugh. Like, and
Yeah.
like I picked the name because so many of my names in the book are very like nature-esque. We have a lot of flower names, and like Glenn kind of fits into that. And also at the time I was really listening to Anastasia the musical, and there's a character named Gleb in there, and that kind of led me that way. But like we can't, I couldn't use Gleb. That was not gonna work.
That's fair. Yeah, I really like the nature side that's kind of
Hmm.
like interwoven throughout the story, and I don't want to go into spoiler territory,
Yeah.
but just to say I liked how you kind of like hinted at some stuff early on and then kind of wove it in later. When you're dealing with high fantasy,
Hmm.
I think there's some expectations that people have around like what that means, and certainly like when we start talking about like Tolkien, who kind of like really standardized a lot of these terminologies.
Right.
When do you decide, or how did you decide to say, okay, I'm going to follow, the fantasy trope that elves are kind of like this, or okay, you know what, I'm actually going to switch it up a little bit or completely break, previous rules or, things that people have done.
Yeah, so the book has three races. We have the humans, the elves, and the crystalline. And so I what I wanted to do was the crystalline were a creation of my own. And so there's something new for the reader to like understand and learn through the book. And I didn't want to bog them down by having like a completely different race that I was coming up with on my own as well. So I was between like calling the elves or fae or where we were going to go with it. And because the elves don't have magic, I thought calling them fae was not going to work at all. Like people would have preconceived notions that like if you're fae, you definitely have magical powers. That makes sense. I felt that elves had a little bit of wiggle room that I could like say that they didn't have magic and people would be able to accept that. And I did draw on Tolkien. I also drew on Dragon Age a little bit in the way that they
Hmm.
handle elves, because my elves are kind of like elongated and look a little bit different. Um, and that's kind of the inspiration I was drawing on for them. But I wanted them to be like accessible to the reader that it's like, okay, I can visualize what these people look like. So I'm not juggling too many different like races of people being thrown at them. But I definitely think like the biggest departure I took is making like the elves the bad guys and making them not have magic. And I remember when I like told my partner that I wanted to make elves like the bad guys, they're like, "Oh, that's really interesting," because usually if they're bad guys, you see them called Fae. It's like, cause they're more like tricksy and stuff. But like, if you think of elves and you think of Tolkien, you think of good guys. And so I wanted that to be like a little bit different in my universe. That like the elves are something to be scared of. They're beautiful, but they're also like scary.
Hmm. Yeah, thank you for saying that because now I can talk about it because I don't want to spoil it for
No, you're
anyone
good.
else.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I actually really like that too of like um, of introducing the elves as like the villainous characters of
hmm
like these like like they're really taking a lot of damage out on people, and it I like that because it was like it was a nice twist of like as soon as I heard elves, I was like, okay, I can kind of have some expectations there. But then you take it and you put it on a twist, and I was
Right.
like, all right, you got me hooked. I want to know more about what's going on here. This
What's
is
going on with these
because
hunts? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, but yeah, my goodness, though, I will say I would say the third act for me was like really hard to put down. uh, because when I'm not going to take say
No,
any
you're fine.
spoilers,
Yeah.
but yeah, definitely when I got near to the third act, I'm like, oh my gosh, I gotta set some time out so that I can just power through this because, whew, oh boy,
It takes off a little bit at the end there. There's a lot going on.
yeah, it does, but in a good way, and I
Yeah.
thought that you handled the flow fairly well. Like
Oh, thank you.
I
Yeah.
I I found there's there's things where you're like you're saying with the different races that you introduce new things, but you don't like labor on the details of it
hmm
too much where it's like, oh my gosh, right, you kind of have to like read a history book to get up to
Right.
speed. um, but then at the same time, you are introducing elements of lore. You're introducing different characters and their backstories. Yeah, I guess what's your approach to how you explain certain things in the world, like,
hmm
and how did you come about to your approach of how much detail you go into in some of these things?
Yeah. So the chapter I originally skipped was like the first world building chapter. Like the way when we first like opened up a little bit and got some more explanation on what the elves were doing and stuff, I was like, I have no idea how to write this down and not make it just a giant info dump here. So I almost just skipped it entirely when I wrote it originally. I knew the world, and so I just wrote the story, and then I interweaved where I felt it worked best for the characters to find out things and make the story work. Because otherwise, like, I just felt like I was just gonna be like, and this is the world, and here you go, everybody. And like this, It was that was I think probably the hardest part of drafting the novel, of like figuring out when do characters need to know what. And that was the one nice thing of working with Dahlia, is that because she comes from such an isolated place, it made sense for her to learn about things.
Hmm.
So like I didn't have a character who knew everything off the bat, so it made sense for other characters to explain things to her, which then made it so that the audience was having it explained to them. I think it's definitely harder if you have a character who like really knows their world, because then they need to have like internal thoughts that are sharing to the audience rather than like having someone explain to them, which I think is a little tougher to work in. Yeah.
That's fair. Yeah, and you're talking a bit about some of the more difficult aspects of writing this book. What would you say was the hardest part about getting to where you're at now, either being the writing, the marketing, getting to the publisher? What was the most challenging thing, and
hmm
what have you learned from that process that if you were able to tell to someone that they might be able to benefit from that?
I think the hardest thing for me, and this is like the number one advice I give to everybody, was just not to edit as I was starting. Just write it down. Get through that first draft, because if you just sit there editing your chapter over and over again, you're never going to move. Because I would have just like been like nitpicking and nitpicking. There is a thing that happens in this book, I won't say what it is. I didn't decide was going to happen until I was halfway done the first draft. And instead of going back, I just finished it as if I had wrote it in the book that this was going to happen the whole time. And then I wrote down in my notes on the outline where I needed to go back and fix some stuff, but I was like, don't touch it now, because if we go back, we're never finishing this. And then I just wrote it out like that had always been planned. And then when I went back and edited, I put it in there so that it actually made sense at the end. So that's the biggest advice I can give to somebody, is just write it. Let it be bad, let it be missing stuff. Make little notes where you need to change things. And also know that your outline, even if you're like a huge like planner like we both are, it's still a living document. So it can change. Like don't feel like, well, I wrote this down, so like this is exactly where I have to go. Like give yourself like a little grace and wiggle room to say like, oh, this was a good idea, but it's not working with what I originally said. So let me go back and change the outline and then keep going.
Hmm. Yeah, that's great advice. I think, I've certainly seen a number of writers talk about how they start writing, they start writing, and then they look at their initial drafts and they just say how bad it is, quote
Yeah.
unquote. And it's
Yeah.
and it's like, I mean, certainly if you look at it objectively, yeah, it's
Right.
probably not that good. But then that's not the focus point. That's the realization that I've had recently, within the last year, is like that's actually what it should be. It should be kind of
Right.
bad. And it's like you're kind of like, I guess the analogy would be like molding clay, because I made some pots not that long ago, or pottery stuff, and it's like the first step of taking that just blob of
hmm
clay and shaping it into something. The first time I kind of stopped and was like, is this what I want to build? It didn't look very good. I mean, debatable of whether you could say it looks good at the end
Right.
anyway, but that's besides the point. But just to say that that first step of taking a step back and looking at it,
Right.
um, it still needed a ways to go, but it had like that core aspect of it still within it, of like, okay, I can see where I'm trying to go here. I can see what it could be. And that shift in mindset really unlocked for me being able to finish my book. So like, yeah, because I feel like I ran into that where I would start something and then I'd go back and I'd start editing it, and then it'd just be this constant cycle of like, oh my gosh, this isn't good enough. But then to push past and say, let's just finish it, let it sit, come back, and then take a look afterwards.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm somebody who like hits their stride while they're writing a book. Like sometimes like even if I'm just going to with the plan, I just got to get it on paper and like figure out the voice and just keep going. I think very little of my third act changed in the editing process. The first act is completely different than what I originally wrote, like just completely. And I think I scrapped like 4 chapters. Like there
Wow.
was there was so much in Tide's End that just I was like, this is gonna bog us down. We're not moving. So like we like it just cut. So yeah, so it's you gotta find like what works best for you, and it's also like it's okay to cut things. Like it's okay to be like, I liked this scene, but it's not serving the book anymore. But and also save all of that writing from those scenes. Because there was like when I cut those 4 chapters, I took some of my favorite lines from them and interwove them later in the novel. So I didn't lose like some of the things that I wrote, but I cut the bulk from them so that they were able to still be a part of the final book.
Hmm, that's awesome. I guess talking a little bit more about so you've got the one book which is at the time of this recording coming out soon. At
Hmm.
the time of releasing the video will probably be around the same time. You've got another book that's in the works with your agent.
Yep.
What else is going on in your world that you want to talk about?
Oh goodness. So we got that book, and then hopefully we'll hear back and see if any sequels are happening for Wolves. We'll hopefully be able to talk about that. Um, Goodness, and then like I'm going to a bunch of author conventions coming up, which is very exciting. I'll be at Dragon Con again this year, which I do cosplay and some panels, so that's fun. I'm doing like a seminar at a writing retreat in May in Virginia, so that should be a lot of fun. And in September, I'll be out in California. Actually, I'm gonna fly to California for a an like an author festival. It's right by Disneyland, and I'm a Disney girly, so I'm like, I'm going to apply to this, and then I'm gonna go to Disneyland the next day.
That's awesome. Yeah, yeah, I remember seeing you posting about the I think it was a women's retreat if I'm remembering correctly. Um, can you talk a little bit about that? I'm curious to know more about it and like how you got
Yeah.
involved with that group.
So I had originally seen that they did a readers retreat last year, and I had wanted to go, and then it just the stars didn't align. And then I saw that they were going to do a writers retreat, and they were asking for applications for authors. And I hemmed and hawed over it. I was like, "Oh, I'm a debut. I don't know if I'm good enough to like apply for this." I finally did last minute, and then I ended up getting the position. I was like, but like, so, and I'll be doing a seminar on like pitching and querying, but like I very specifically want to make sure it's like pitching as well because I don't want it to only be towards like traditionally published. I want people to like take from it what we can pitch on social media to like market ourselves if we're self-publishing as well. So yeah, it should be a lot of fun. I think it's like 3 days, and we're gonna be doing writing activities and stuff in the woods. It's glamping in like a tent, so that should be fun.
That's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds like a good time. And you know, as much as you say, you know, that you're a debut author, you've got a lot of value to give to the world, and I think like your story is definitely a part of that, and a big part of that, I'd say. But just listening to you and you know reading about you know your backstory and social media. Yeah, like you've got a lot to say in a good way. And so yeah, I'm happy to hear that you know that this one event is taking you on, but certainly hopeful that more will do it because I think that you've got a lot of good things to say, and I hope more people hear it.
Well, I think I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess is there anything else that you want to talk about that you think that people would be interested in knowing about you that may not be existing in the social space?
No, I think we're good. I pretty much I put too much out there sometimes, but like honestly, like it's not in this book, but I'm also disabled, and I do talk about my disability a lot online because with having Crohn's disease, and part of the other book I'm working on is my main character has an ostomy, um, and that's something that's been so stigmatized, like of like people thinking it's gross or stuff like that. And I lived with an ostomy for a year, so I there's something I really wanted to also write about. So it's like it's just important to me to write books for teenagers with representation that I did not have growing up, and to be able to like have people look at characters and be like, oh, maybe I'm not so weird, and like and be able to like look up to people. And I'm really blessed that like it's happening. Like I have a book coming out, and I'm getting to do that thing I really wanted to do, and I'm just really thankful to be here.
Indeed, indeed. Yeah, and I definitely want to Um, I definitely want to say that not every author has that drive to do that. So um, I hope that you can recognize, and if not, and I'll say it for you, is that's awesome that you have that drive, and then that drive is leading you to do something about it.
Yeah.
I think that you're of a select few, I would say, that decide to do something to make representation more diverse. So yeah, keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I want to be appreciative of your time. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. Is there I guess, where can people find you if they want to connect with you or learn more about your book?
Yeah, if you want to find me on social media, it's Ria the Wolf on. Oh no, it's Ria the Wolf Writes now. Ria the Wolf was just my cosplay. So it's Ria the Wolf Writes on a Instagram, TikTok, and Threads. That's where you can mostly find me. I used to be on X, but not anymore. That's a terrible place now. And I'm probably most active on Instagram, and feel free to tag and reach out to me. I love talking to people about writing and stuff like that, so I'm always open to it.
Very awesome. Awesome. I'll put the links to the descriptions that you mentioned and some few that you didn't as well. But yeah, thanks again for joining the podcast, and
Of course.
hope everyone has a good rest of your day.
Thank you.